All right, folks, welcome to Y6, Yankaroos Season 6, or Episode 6, Season 6. I'm getting well ahead of ourselves. I'm Junayd Mahmood.
I'm Daniel Whiten.
And when our powers combine, we are the Yankaroos, bringing you the best discussion. I don't know. I mean, maybe I shouldn't. I think it's the best. It's the best. It's the best show that I watch on football, or that I do on football.
I think so too. I mean, not a lot of people know that it's the best yet, but when they find out, they certainly will.
Totally. And so the 90-second pitch for Yankaroos is that we take European football and then we place it within the context of like modern movements in society and certain and cultural happenings and what's going on in the broader world.
That's right. That's what we do. If you're here for tactics, then you need to find another podcast, I think. Not that we don't know about that, but I always think that it's something that I've always liked about sport. Is it it comes together in so many other different ways with society, and the value of a game is much more just than the value of a victory to people, So I think that's something that I've always found interesting about any sport that I've followed, and that's what we bring in here on the podcast.
Yeah, no. So if you are telling your friends about Yankaroos and they're like, oh, why should I listen to it? Like another bunch of random dudes who are super excited about football and now want to pontificate about whatever their opinions are. Just be like, okay, well, these are two really clever guys who know a thing or two beyond football, and make it interesting and relevant for all.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah, so that's a pretty good transition and segue into a topic we only found out about yesterday. I only found out about it yesterday. You found out about it today. We don't really know all the details, but it is super relevant to what's going on in at least in American society these days, which is the Cristiano Ronaldo rape allegations. Details are just coming out. The Der Spiegel, the sports team at Der Spiegel, did a pretty lengthy investigative piece on Cristiano Ronaldo and a model from Las Vegas. Apparently, this summer when Ronaldo was supposed to transfer from Manchester United to Real Madrid, he was partying in Las Vegas during the off season. Met this woman, and yeah, things ensued. And then they signed a non-disclosure agreement about it. Ronaldo paid her off, and now she's coming out in a civil suit about it. And it's really interesting in the context of what else is going on with this whole Supreme Court nomination, the entire metoo movement, which has was started about 2 years ago and is now reaching pretty much a crescendo in the political field, in Hollywood, and now it seems like it's hitting sports as well.
Yeah, we'll preface it by saying that we're like two dudes, so our experience with the Me Too movement is secondary, I suppose. But it is interesting because there's always historically been this culture where in any sport that I've known about, because generally speaking, sport is at a professional level is played by men, and so there is and these men have a very short window in which they will be valuable to their clubs or teams, countries, whatever. So there's quite often what will happen is that if an allegation like this surfaces, it'll be swept under the rug, and they'll try the best that they can to whether it's by paying someone off or whether it's by making someone seem not credible. And generally speaking, that's not really hampered anyone's ability to continue playing. I don't know any top-line player who has had these kind of allegations and then has had to stop playing. And again, I've just found out about it. I don't know anything about it, or wouldn't want to comment on the specifics of it really. But it would be interesting to see if this is now, it's happened in the entertainment industry. There's people who have done things perhaps a long time ago or perhaps quite recently who have no longer been able to work. They've been sacked by their jobs and all this kind of stuff, networks and that kind of thing. But it hasn't really come to sport yet. So it would be really interesting to see if it would be something. I think that the culture is also very different in the US and Italy, so I would be interested with that. But yeah.
Just to add a stipulated fact here, the woman has a name. Her name is Kathryn Mayorga, and so I don't want to seem insensitive by saying it's just a woman. I think it's important to take all these allegations really seriously. Obviously, also the presumption of innocence before all the facts are laid out there. So don't want to come off as flippant about it. And the reason we're discussing this is because it is a changed. It is a different time now. I remember as an Arsenal fan, I remember when Robin van Persie had a rape allegation against him, and I'm sure it affected the team. I don't remember exactly if he had to stop playing or not, but it was a serious criminal allegation. And he's a Dutch player. I think the alleged rape occurred in the Netherlands, and I also think that culturally they are a bit more advanced in how seriously they take some of these allegations. Also, Karim Benzema had certain allegations against him as well as a couple of other of his France teammates. I don't remember exactly who. But I think it was Ribery as well, and they were eventually cleared. I just wonder now, since it's Cristiano Ronaldo, and we've discussed before, he is possibly the most marketable athlete in the world, or at least in the top three, alongside LeBron and maybe Colin Kaepernick now. And so I think it's on a whole nother level, maybe not in terms of power compared to a Supreme Court justice, but in terms of how culturally relevant it is, it's a pretty big deal. And so I'm super interested to see how this develops and how it develops differently compared to how those other cases have developed in the past.
Yeah, definitely. And it has this international element, which will be interesting because much of the stuff has taken place in the US, the debate that's going on in the US, and there's a different gender culture in every country. So it would be interesting to see how that would play out. One thing that is kind of making itself very apparent in the last few years is that there's no benefit for apologizing and saying you're sorry. I mean, every one of the men, because they're all men pretty much. I don't think there's any, I think they're pretty much all men who have come out and said, yeah, it was me, I'm sorry, I take full responsibility, I'm going to, it used to be different. Tiger Woods, David Letterman, they said, I'm really sorry, tearful press conference, then, they're back to work, but now if somebody admits something, then generally they're pretty much, blacklisted. It seems to take place.
It's crazy because before those used to be scandals of infidelity, right? But mostly with consensual, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I don't remember the David Letterman thing, but I know with Tiger Woods, he was driving drunk. He was under the influence of some medication and he was cheating on his wife with, I think, several women, with multiple people. Yeah. And that was, a huge blemish. I think a lot of his sponsors dropped him. Although Nike, I think
Nike was the main one that stayed with him, but it didn't. I mean, and he didn't win a tournament for 10 years until last week. So, but I think that if you look at it now, that you'll have in the political spectrum in the US, you have guys that are center left, I suppose, who have come out and admitted it and said, "Yep, these allegations are true," etc., and they haven't been seen since. Whereas a lot of the guys on the right, like Roy Moore, Donald Trump, Kavanaugh, they've just said it's not happened. This woman's crazy, whatever.
And they survived.
And they've survived. So it's creating a very strange, disincentive, I suppose. I mean, again, sport's a different thing. I imagine that this will the way that people think about this will be will depend highly on what they think about Ronaldo. If they're big Ronaldo fans, they'll probably think, this woman's crazy. If they don't like soccer, if they don't like him, then they'll have a different opinion, which seems to be always the case. Like if it's your favorite actor that gets you, like, it probably isn't true. That's what people do. So,
and I think there's elements of that also. For example, in comedy, I think Louis C.K. is one of the few who has actually said, like, yes, these things are true. I did this. I've got a lot of soul searching to do. I'm going to go into intensive therapy, and I openly and wholeheartedly apologize. And now the question is, like, what is the appropriate punishment? And when is it appropriate for him to come back and start earning a living again? And I think it's very different with an athlete who, doesn't have much face time in front of an audience, and is mostly, on the field with 10 other players, and is performing with his or her feet, as opposed to like standing on a stage solo. And like being so vulnerable to being jeered or being, I don't know, protested against or something like that, which in the case of Louis C.K., I think, probably will happen at some of his shows, and it'll be much more difficult for him. And so the question is, like, what kind of consequences will Ronaldo face in the near term while all this plays out?
Definitely. That's the thing. Because in the end, Louis C.K., all of the stuff, he was dropped by the networks, that Netflix, by all of the networks that supported him, they dropped him because they, it would be nice to say because they have a really good heart and they disagreed with what he did, and, you're not supposed to do that, but really because it was not, financially beneficial for them to maintain a tie with him. It looked bad. It's the same as last week. Norm Macdonald was booked on the Jimmy Fallon show. He said that he felt sorry for Roseanne and Louis C.K., and then he had the appearance cancelled because apparently the people in the Tonight Show were so emotional that he would even come, because how could you support these people? And it's just this was this thing of, I don't think a sports team, when you have an athlete who's in the prime of their career, who's so marketable, it would have to be to the point where they really think this is doing more harm than good, and I don't know that would happen necessarily in sport.
Yeah. I think there's two things here. I think Juventus, I think Cristiano Ronaldo is still playing at a very elite level, but I think that the commercial sense for Juventus is very front loaded. He's already 33 years old, and so like he's going to be very dominant over the next couple seasons. I don't know how long his contract is, but I imagine it's like at least 3-4 years. And so if his marketability takes a dent in these first couple of years, I think that really turns the business model or the business case for acquiring Cristiano Ronaldo from Real Madrid on its head, or maybe breaks that case. And so it'll be really interesting to see whether Juventus stand by him, whether they're quiet, to what extent they're full-throated in their support for him. It really only makes sense for them to be full-throated because he's a member of the squad. He'll be playing likely week in, week out, and he's a very important commercial asset for them.
Yeah, it remains to be seen, I suppose. It'll be the usual thing. If sponsors start pulling out, that's where, FIFA only got its act into gear and hasn't really done that. But when sponsors started to threaten them, everything else that was being threatened against them, they didn't mind. But it wasn't until the sponsors started to threaten to pull money out. So I think that will be the same with Juventus, I imagine. But we'll see. If
you think about the spectrum of what is actually caught up in the metoo movement, you have cases like Louis C.K., which in many ways are very despicable, but ultimately are sexual harassment and.
It's not criminal.
I mean, it could be in terms of like indecent exposure or what have you.
I think if you consent to an indecent exposure, it's probably not a crime. But
there were some cases where he didn't. I think in many ways he extracted consent air quotes, by exploiting his power in the industry that he was working in from female comedians, or he would just like be on the phone and be, you know, masturbating. Sorry, we try and keep this a family show, but it's sometimes you got to talk about this stuff. But rape is on the other end of that. Like there's no, you know. Yeah. There's no gray area here. I mean, Harvey Weinstein is you know, not a good person by any means. Like he's not someone who can be redeemed. You know, if these allegations prove true, and it's looking like they're proving true, and Ronaldo is in a Harvey Weinstein bucket here. If he raped her, and like I don't know what all the facts are, but you know, that's a pretty big deal. And so it could be a pretty, I mean, it's terrible to talk about these things in like sporting or commercial terms, because they're very much human tragedies when some of these things do occur. But in terms of his cultural relevance, I think it's a seminal moment in sport. Maybe it's too early to say that, but I see the makings of something really, you know, earth-shaking here. So I guess we'll have to keep an eye on that as it develops, and you know, not be too quick to judge or too quick to pontificate about it, but it'll be interesting how it shakes out.
Absolutely.